The first thing she said wasn't hello. It was barely louder than the hum of the cafe lights. "No one wants to date me," she whispered, staring into her untouched cup like it held the verdict of her life. I could have walked away then. Most people would have. Subscribe to the channel. But something in the way her voice cracked made me stay, made me listen, made me feel like if I left, I'd be proving her right before she even finished her story. She sat across from me with her shoulders pulled in, as if she were trying to disappear. We had met through a mutual friend who thought we'd understand each other. I didn't know what that meant until I noticed how carefully she moved, how she avoided sudden gestures, how her smile appeared only for a second before retreating. I asked simple questions: where she worked, what she liked to read, and her answers were polite but guarded, like doors open just wide enough to peek through. Every time our eyes met, she looked away, afraid I might see something she wasn't ready to show. When the silence stretched too long, she laughed softly, the kind of laugh that apologizes for existing. "People think I'm strange," she said. "They say I'm intense. Or quiet. Or too much." She took a breath, steadying herself. "But really, it's because once they get close, I tell them the truth. And that's when they leave." Her fingers trembled as she reached for the hem of her shirt, then paused, giving me one last chance to stop her without saying a word. She lifted her shirt just enough to show me, not her body in any intimate way, but the story written across her skin. Long, pale scars traced where illness had once taken control of her life. Marks of surgeries, of battles fought in hospital rooms while the world outside kept moving. She dropped the fabric quickly, shame flooding her face. "This is when they say they're not ready," she whispered. "Or that they didn't sign up for something so heavy." My chest tightened. Not because of what I saw, but because of what she believed it meant. I didn't reach for her. I didn't look away either. I simply said the only honest thing I felt in that moment. "I'm not going anywhere." The word surprised even me, but they settled between us like a promise neither of us knew how to take back. She looked at me like she was waiting for the punchline. "You don't have to say that," she replied. "People always do, right before they leave." I shook my head. I told her about my own past, about how I'd been defined by a single chapter of my life for years, how people saw the label before they saw me. I told her staying wasn't heroic. It was just human. When we finally stood to leave, she thanked me for listening, not for staying. That's when I realized how rare it was for anyone to do even that. Days turned into weeks. We met for walks, for quiet dinners, for conversations that stretched late into the night. The second hook came not with drama, but with a question she asked one evening, her voice steadier than before. "What happens," she said, "when you wake up one day and realize I'm still broken?" It wasn't a test. It was fear, honest and raw. And it pulled me in deeper than any grand confession ever could. I told her the truth again. That broken wasn't a permanent state. That everyone carries damage, some visible, some hidden. She didn't believe me right away. Healing, I learned, isn't a straight line, it's a series of small steps forward and sudden pauses where doubt creeps back in. There were days she pushed me away, convinced I'd leave once the reality of her follow-up appointments, her scars, her quiet panic became inconvenient. There were nights she cried, apologizing for needing reassurance like it was a flaw, but there were also moments of light. The first time she laughed without checking herself. The first time she wore a shirt she loved instead of one meant to hide. The first time she spoke about her future without lowering her voice. Each time, I stayed. Not because I was strong, but because love, I realized, isn't about fixing someone. It's about choosing them, again and again, even when the past tries to speak louder than the present. One evening, months later, she stood in front of the mirror and looked at her reflection without flinching. "I used to think these scars were the reason no one would love me," she said. Now I think they're the reason I know who will. She turned to me then, not asking for reassurance, but offering gratitude. And in that moment, I understood the real message of our story: people don't leave because of scars. They leave because they're afraid of depth, of truth, of staying when things aren't easy. Love isn't proven by attraction alone, but by presence. By the decision to say, and mean, I'm not going anywhere. And sometimes, that choice doesn't just change someone else's life, it changes yours too. The night she finally believed me didn't start with romance. It started with a phone call at 2:17 a.m., her voice shaking so badly I could barely understand the words. "I'm sorry to wake you," she said, already apologizing for needing someone. I can't breathe past the thoughts tonight." That was the moment I realized this wasn't about grand promises or dramatic scenes. This was about who shows up when it's dark, quiet, and inconvenient. That I drove to her place without thinking twice. When she opened the door, she looked smaller than I remembered, wrapped in an oversized sweater, eyes swollen from crying. She tried to smile, tried to say she was okay now, but her body betrayed her. She stepped back, letting me in, then sat on the edge of the couch like she wasn't sure she was allowed to take up space. I sat beside her, close enough that she could feel I was there, far enough that she didn't feel trapped. "I hate this part of myself," she said after a long silence. "The part that still gets scared. The part that thinks you'll wake up one day and realize I'm too much work." Her hands twisted together.
Holding fresh flowers, her shoulders slightly hunched as if grief still carried weight no matter how much time passed. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air felt sacred, heavy with things unsaid. Then she looked at me and smiled faintly, not with hope, but with honesty. "I was wondering when I'd see you again," she said. We sat on a nearby bench, talking quietly, careful not to disturb the peace of the place. She admitted she'd been scared of losing what little connection she still had to my brother, scared of being judged, scared of her own heart. I told her about my sleepless nights, about the guilt that came in waves, about how every step forward felt like stepping on fragile glass. Somewhere in that conversation, something shifted. We both realized we weren't running toward each other, we were walking slowly, making sure every step was real. The real challenge came from the world outside. Friends noticed. Family sensed a change. Some were silent, some supportive, and some openly disapproved. Whispers followed us, questions we didn't know how to answer. But through it all, we kept choosing honesty over hiding. We talked openly about my brother, about how his memory wasn't a wall between us but a bridge that had brought us here. She never stopped loving him, and I never stopped missing him, and somehow, that truth made what we were building stronger, not weaker. One evening, months later, she told me something that finally settled my heart. She said loving me didn't take anything away from what she had with him. "Love isn't a single room," she said quietly. "It's a house that grows when you let it." In that moment, I felt the last of my resistance fade. Not because the pain was gone, but because I understood it didn't have to control us anymore.